There is no denying small single board computers are awesome, and apparently a lot of you feel the same way. My Ultimate Builder's Guide from 2 years ago has almost 420,000 views. And while I plan to make an updated video, a lot has changed in 2 years, and the price of small single board computers like the Raspberry Pi 4 have gone through the roof. Pretty much double. And the Pi 4, even the 8GB model, will still struggle with some of the higher end emulations such as Dreamcast, PS2, and some N64 titles like the infamous GoldenEye. So single board computers are pretty expensive to build now, and they're a little bit underspec'd or anemic in the horsepower department. Not horsepower, we ain't talking cars here, the processing department. A company called Beelink that specializes in mini computers sent out a tiny powerhouse with a 12th generation Intel Core i5, 16 gigs of DDR5 RAM, Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5.2, gigabit 2.5 port, NVMe SSD, and the grunt, the power, to push that troublesome emulation. However, it has a smaller form factor, and cheaper price tag for that matter, than building a dedicated small form factor PC. So in my eyes, it kind of bridges the gap between building a dedicated single board computer like a Raspberry Pi 4, or building yourself a small form factor PC with a dedicated graphics card. This is a fully functional home PC that you can get some basic productivity done on. But games, Kevin, what about the games? It has the juice, it's got the grunt. Quick disclaimer for my audience, the Stallions and Stallionettes, this mini PC was sent for review, but this is going to be an honest, comprehensive review. I haven't been paid or told to say anything about it, so if there's any cons, shortcomings, or areas of improvement, you're going to hear about it. So these companies make better products over time. Now, Beelink does have several models of mini computers, and the one we're focusing on today is the SEI 12 Pro, meaning it is a 12th generation Intel processor, specifically a 1240p, which is a small form factor Intel i5. Now, they do have other models or entire other series or families. Under the mini PC tab, we're under SEI. The second option is going to be the 1240p, which has nothing to do with resolution output like 1080p or 1440p. This is actually the serial number of the processor. And a price tag of $600 from the manufacturer, and this does correlate to their listing on Amazon. I saw $700 and I was thinking, why is it $100 more? But then you apply this $90 coupon, bringing it down to $10 more on Amazon, which I understand it probably cost them a little bit more logistically to list it and ship it through Amazon. They do have 3 other configurations with different components, but this is what we have here today, that 12th generation i5, 500 gigabytes of storage on that NVMe, and 16 gigabytes of DDR5 RAM. Now, this needs mention as we browse this landing page. It is very hard to navigate as it snaps you to the next page when you are just barely scrolling with the mouse wheel. As you can see, I stop scrolling and it jumps to the next section. Makes it very disorienting and very difficult to read the key features. Size-wise, this thing is petite. It is Paquito, about 1/40th the size of a standard desktop. You like benchmarks? So do I. Here's some numbers for you. The top of the case has a waterproof fleece, which in essence makes it somewhat spill-proof. I'm not saying to go see how many Dr. Peppers you can load up on the board or anything like that. And I'm certainly not going to test the validity of this statement in the video, but it should be somewhat spill-proof, but it's not completely sealed. As you see, there's still exposed USB ports and whatnot. How's cooling? Pretty darn good, actually. 3-sided air inlet fan. As for our short and long storage, so our RAM, we're talking 16 gigabytes. That's dual 8 gig sticks, and a PCIe 4.0 NVMe SSD. Always such a mouthful to say that, but 500 gigabytes of storage. Pretty damn fast too. Some useful software benchmarks with Keyshot, Adobe Photoshop, Microsoft Office, and taking a little Betty by nap. Little testing in a 40 Celsius room. That's about 104 degrees Fahrenheit. That room is hot as hell. Do they not have air conditioning? In all reality, it's a stress test to see how much sheer punishment, absolute devastation can be wrecked on this board before it shuts itself down or starts thermal throttling. More awesome information. This is useful and exploded diagram of all the components, which you can see is not a whole hell of a lot. You got the actual case, you have your cooling fan, which also has the heatsink, then you got your MOBO, which indeed has that 1240 itty bitty tiny i5 processor socketed. Then on the other side, you have your 2 sticks of DDR5 RAM, 2 8GB sticks for a total of 16. I'm killing it with the math today. Then your storage, then the fan bracket, and you do have space in this plastic caddy for a 2.5-inch SSD hard drive. Ports, plugs, and sockets. You've got 2 USB 3.0s, then you have 1 USB Type-C port and a 3.5mm headphone jack. You also have a power button so you can use your computer. You got a Wi-Fi 6 card on board. You have Bluetooth 5.2, which is the latest and greatest. You have triple display ports because you have 2 full-size HDMIs, and then you have that USB-C, which could also be a video out. Then this kind of struck me as interesting. You can also wall mount this itty-bitty PC. Although it's so tiny, it's not going to take up much desk space. How small? Real small. Here's the measurements here in millimeters.
The Uzi 9mm.
And then if you you want a full breakdown of the tech specs, which I know you do because you're a hardcore PC gamer, you're used to building rigs in your dad's basement, here it is for you. The processor has 12 cores, 16 threads, and does run on a base boost clock, base 3.3 gigahertz, and she'll ramp up to 4.4 if you're gaming or doing some video editing or definitely running a benchmark. Is it power hungry? Not really. GPU, don't get confused. This doesn't have a physical graphics card strapped to it or anything. This is integrated graphics, part of the CPU. And this shows out of those HDMI ports, you can push a maximum resolution of 2304 at 60 hertz. So 2160p, i.e. 4K, no issues whatsoever. And you should have these items in your box. If you're missing one of these, Houston, we have a problem. As for the packaging, no matter what model of the SEI family you select, it will have the same packaging, a little stamp in the top left letting you know which of their warehouses it was shipped from. Then on the back, you will have a little sticker with the specifics of your model. Removing the outer sleeve shows a white cardboard box, which opens from the top. You do have your user manual top dead center. We'll take a close look in just a sec. You do have some foam keeping your PC in place. You do have a well-labeled accessory box to the left. Not a box, just a tease. It flips open. It's a little flippity flap, and you have your accessories underneath here. Kind of loose, actually, underneath the PC. Then you have the computer itself, which is itty-bitty, but also quite dense. Another foam block, and then your accessories under here. You're going to have your user manual with some color illustrations. It does have 5 languages, English only being pages 1 through 4, and it really doesn't give you much information, although there really isn't a whole lot to this computer, but it does show you how to install RAM if you wanted to swap out the sticks and put in your own. You have a very short HDMI 2.0 port. It is labeled as being high speed on the side. Then you have an even shorter HDMI cable. This is about a 6-inch jumper, if that's giving it a lot of credit. Then you are going to have the metal wall mount bracket if you'd like to wall mount this PC. You have the hardware if you do want to get wild, and it does look as if the screws already have some Loctite pre-applied. You have a pretty beefy AC/DC adapter. Then you have your PC with a plastic dust cover and a very important warning that I do recommend you read, because I guarantee you somebody has made this mistake or will continue to do it. Use the power adapter that comes with the product. Do not use the USB-C port to power this computer. It'll cause damage. Also, during the system boot process, if you cannot log into your personal account, please turn off Wi-Fi and LAN. Select the skip option and then log into your personal account in the system. But I should be a voice actor or something. Sweet, let's peel her like a banana real quick, get our potassium, and get our gaming in as well. You're being a finicky bee. You've heard of Cardi B. This is her sister, Finicky Bee. She's a faster rapper. The entire body is metal. This is not plastic whatsoever. This is metal. And then you have this very soft cloth material, which again, as we saw on the website, is juice resistant. So if you want to start slathering Capri Sun, spilling Tang all over your desk, you're good to go. I'm not going to do that. This is a very high quality miniature PC, which for $600 you would expect that, but this takes it a step further. I will say I do not like this mirrored finish on the front. This will collect fingerprints and micro scratches like nobody's business. Cosmetically a very handsome looking computer. I am going to peel off this i5 sticker. I know what processor's on board, thank you. This thing looks and feels incredibly well built. Now, before I hook up this PC and start using it, I definitely want to see the internals. You do have 4 small Phillips heads in each corner on the bottom of the PC. And then with those 4 small Phillips heads removed, this little rubber silicone tab, you grab on this and firmly lift up, and that will help you remove this back panel, which is, again, metal. And does have a rubberized pad here, most likely to reduce vibration. And then this is the other end of that silicone pull tab, which if this does ever rip off, it's going to be extremely difficult to get this bottom panel off. Awesome. This looks very nice. Looks like we have 1, 2, 3 Phillips heads to remove. Keep those screws separate. Please disassemble carefully after power off. Well, she's never been powered on in the first place, so we're definitely good to go. These 2 screws separate as well. Actually, I think these, yep, those are the same. Then this lifts up. Oh, looks like there's a little ribbon cable right there. Be careful with that. Oh, okay, it comes out pretty long, actually. Get that up and out of the way. And then it looks like you got 4 more Phillips heads in each corner. Oh, okay. Nice and easy. Again, there's a ribbon cable, and you do have your cable for the fan connected to the motherboard, the only actual chip or board here with this PC. Let's unplug that carefully. And this is a long screw right here. We're just gonna set this aside for now. Cool, awesome, a little ribbon cable in there, and then you have your NVMe SSD, that 2280 size right there. And these are your 2 sticks of RAM, 2 8GB sticks of DDR5 RAM. Very fast as well, 4800 megahertz, labeled right there. So you know they're not mislabeling these things on the box or anything. The actual components are what they say. And if you wanted to upgrade your storage, as we do have 500 gigabytes here, but if I wanted to chuck in 2 terabytes or whatever, you can do that here. And this does also have a little thermal pad on it as well. Interesting, and then on the plastic cover it says SSD cooler, but it's just plastic here, so it'd be nice if there was a metal heatsink or something here, but you could add your own. It'd have to be very low profile to make clearance though. Now before we hook up this mini PC, can we take just a minute to appreciate how much work has been done in the beach-themed guest room, and also how decent the cable management is with this standing desk. Going up. Little cable skeleton action in there. This room is definitely a work in progress. There's going to be a whole heck of a lot happening here, as the beach themed guest room is a second setup where I'm going to be able to do damn near everything I can do in the actual gamer heaven. So that's going to be pretty sick. I do wish that the barrel plug end or the 3-prong of the power outlet, the included power supply, was longer, because this is going to make cable management quite difficult in a lot of people's setups. If your desk is low enough, you can plug in the barrel inside, drop down the brick, tie up this excess, and plug this into the wall. I did end up using both of the included HDMI cables, that little shorty, just unplug my other desktop, and use that short jumper as well as the less short HDMI cable. Don't worry about those exposed cables, that's not permanent. Those will get dealt with, just pretend they're not there. It is typical new PC setup, naming your PC, selecting your preferences, how you're going to use this PC, and how you want your data shared, or don't. Any Windows PCs you have on the same account, you will be able to sync settings, because my personal uses with this mini PC are going to be very different than my other two PCs, which have substantially more processing power. The R14 in the guest room, as well as, if we take a little walk to the gamer heaven, this is pretty cool to have both these rooms parallel to each other. It's basically like having two home offices, both very capable. But here's Project Zero, which you've seen on the channel before, absolute monster. These are generally my settings with desktops. Since they're not laptops, this is going to be a stationary experience. Yes, I know this is a mini PC and I could take it on the go. I'm not going to. It's never going to leave this house. I don't need location services. I do leave Find My Device on. It is very secure, as it is linked with your Microsoft account, which should be backed up with two-factor authentication. I recommend the Google Authenticator app. And then me personally, I always untick these boxes. Skip. Oh, I'm a VIP. Access has been granted. You're giving me a free trial? Screw off. Decline. You know what happens at the end of a free trial, right? They try and bill you with a recurring payment for something that you probably already own, like Microsoft Office. Get 100 gig more, baby. No thanks. I've already got terabytes of local storage. You've seen this explosion of silken ribbons before. This is Windows 11. By default, the orientation of these monitors are flipped as to what I would like them to be. So when I move the mouse to the left, it travels back around and then over here. That's not going to work for me. Right click, display settings. Yeah, let's go ahead and flip these bad boys. If you're not sure which monitor is which, hit identify and it will pop a number. That's useful if you have 3-4 monitors and maybe they're in a weird orientation. And also this monitor is a little bit smaller, which is seen here, and we're going to pull it down to where it lines up at the bottom of the monitor and then hit apply. And now my mouse is just fluidly moving across. I'm of course going to move the taskbar over to the left-hand side. To do that, right click, taskbar settings. I'm going to deactivate all of these to clean up my taskbar. Then I'm going to move the taskbar to the left. Taskbar behaviors, extend this. By default, it will be at center. No thank you. Let's bring it back to Windows 10 with the left layout. There she is. Also, we need to engage a dark theme real quick because this is just gross. To do that, right click, go to personalization, then click colors. And by default, it's in light mode. I don't like getting flashbanged every time I turn on my PC. Dark mode not only looks cosmetically more pleasing, but actually if you're on battery power, not plugged into the wall, so maybe a cell phone, tablet, etc., dark mode uses slightly less battery life as it doesn't have to illuminate the entire screen, usually just text and outlines. The next order on the docket with a new PC is always going to be to uninstall bloatware, all those unwanted programs. For example, WhatsApp, TikTok, Solitaire, ESPN, Prime Video, Clipchamp. What the hell is a Clipchamp? Oh, a video editor. I'm good with mine, thank you. I do have linked in the description below a step-by-step guide that you can follow along with. All the first steps when you build or buy a new PC. First stroke of the key, so to speak, when you power it on and you get through the BIOS menu of your motherboard and you do that initial setup of Windows, but very useful guide linked in the description below. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to run Cinebench R23 benchmark to get the single and multi-core performance of the processor. Let's run the first poll, or start the first poll. Run it and gun it. Just visually looking at the benchmark, it's rendering that image relatively quickly for being a computer of its size, of its magnitude. You don't have to sit here and wait for it to complete. I'm just gonna patiently stare at the monitor. Just kidding, I got things to do. This has another 9 minutes and 25 seconds. I'll be back at that time. The results are in. How many points do we rack up in Cinebench? 9,247. That sounds like a big number. It's not, it's pretty small, but so's the PC. Now that is multi-core performance. That is the first pull, but we're gonna run 2 more back to back to see if there's any thermal throttling, as running a benchmark is the most strenuous process you can put your PC through. More than video editing, more than 4K gaming while streaming and video capturing or anything like that. Benchmark is just that. It's balls to the wall to test your PC. What a monstrous beast. That is the sound of the fan doing the Lord's work. I put my lapel or lavalier mic right down here so you can get a sound check during the benchmark. But this mesh cloth grate on top is an intake and sucks in cool air, and then your hot air is exhausting or expelling out of the back of the PC. Back here. Ooh, yeah, that's warm back there. Ooh, she's running a benchmark. I got no fingertips left after that. Don't tell the FBI. I do have fingertips left, but it's hot back there. You know it's not hot? The cable not management happening over here. I just hooked this little PC up. Speaking of hooked up, I am using a wireless mouse and keyboard via 2.4 gigahertz dongles plugged into the front suck holes of this mini PC. And they were plug and play. As soon as I plugged them in, they instantaneously started working on this PC. Even at the loudest this little PC is ever going to be, which is right now during a benchmark, it's not very loud. And it's not an annoying high-pitched whine or whir, which I was a little bit worried about. A lot of times with small fans, the frequency or the pitch of the sound it produces is more annoying than the actual volume or decibel of how loud it is. This isn't the case. It's just a standard kind of low, dull, off in the distance white noise. The second pull has completed with a score of 9,314. The third and final multi-core results is a 9303, so very consistent, not losing any performance whatsoever. And it was not very hot. Again, no heat from the top because this is actually an intake up here. You can feel a little bit of cool air up here. But then in the back, you're getting hot air dissipated or exhausted. Now, if there was an identical system, or at least a comparable, similar system, it would be listed right next to my results. We've got two more benchmarks to run. The first one is going to be a network speed test for that Wi-Fi card. Holy God, I hope that's not accurate. My goodness gracious. And then we're going to run Unigine Heaven to test the graphics card, which is actually integrated with the CPU. These are the results I'm getting out of that Wi-Fi card, and my router is across the hall. For a speed comparison, these polls were done this morning on Project Zero, which is plugged via Ethernet to that router right there. Now I'm running Unigine Heaven, which is a great graphical benchmark. It is pretty old, but I still use it, and I know a lot of other PC builders do, because it is very accurate and it's also very fun to watch as well. Now I like a lot of Unigine's newer graphical benchmarks, such as Superposition or Superimposition, one of those, picture on screen here, but I always run Heaven as well. Now this is the most basic bare bones settings at 720p, very low graphical settings, and we're sitting at about 61 frames per second average currently, but the benchmark is only in scene 6 of 26. I wanted to start with very base level settings to see if this was even stable before I start cranking up the graphical settings. But this PC seems to be handling the benchmark at 720p, no problem. Respectable first results with an average FPS of 61 and a score of 1559. And here's the results of the second poll. No, I had a clip of me playing Half-Life Black Mesa, which is a community rebuild or remake of the original Half-Life. Fantastic game, an older FPS title, and it was running at no problem at 1440p low mid settings. I say low mid because it was a little mix blend of both. Obviously shadows and lighting I cut down on a bit. It was a little bit choppy in some of the wider open areas when the draw distance was pretty long, but in some of the indoor laboratories and corridors, which is actually the majority of the game, it was actually very playable. That footage just disappeared into the nether regions, into the void. Now for something a little more modern, we have Dying Light 2. The initial cutscene is playing no problem. Now I've got some earbuds plugged into the 3.5mm jack in the front of the PC, and then I am using both of the USB ports with USB dongles for this wireless keyboard and mouse. But there we run into a small problem. I'd like to plug into a gamepad, either a wireless dongle or a wired controller, and even something like the Raspberry Pi has 4 USB ports on the front. Here we're limited to 2, technically 3, but one of them's a USB-C port. Interesting, so I do have my Steam overlay enabled, but the frame rate counter is not there. I can see where it's supposed to be at, but it's a little bit glitched out. Speaking of glitched out, holy moly. So this is going to be 1440p low settings, and according to my iMeter, probably about 28-30 frames per second. Playable subjective. A lot of people would deem this playable. I wouldn't get enjoyment from playing with a choppy, stuttery game like this. I wouldn't be able to enjoy the beautiful gameplay. So no, I don't really deem this playable. And there we approach the performance ceiling of this PC, which isn't necessarily very high. But again, if you're using this for emulation, or maybe some older PC titles like Black Mesa, which I was playing pretty fluidly and smoothly, then this PC is perfect. Can we take a moment to realize together this is a spray-painted Pringle with some glitter flakes, and this looks like a warped taco shell that spent too much time in the oven. So gaming performance is decent as long as you stick around the low to medium settings, and you might be wondering why something like the Steam Deck can play a lot of titles at medium, high, or sometimes even ultra settings if it's older games, and that is because the native resolution of that handheld is 800p, but if you've ever tried to dock your Steam Deck and output to a monitor or TV that's a larger resolution, such as 1440p, you're not in the medium and high settings anymore, you're down in the low range, and that's the same thing with this mini PC. A lot of my 90s and early 2000s PC titles had no problems whatsoever whatsoever. All of my retro emulation had no issues, which is fantastic. Primarily what I'm going to be using this mini PC for, a one-stop shop, not really shop, but the final destination, if you will. Well, that sounds morbid or cryptic, kind of scary. An all-in-one retro gaming powerhouse with a slew of retro consoles and a massive library. And while we're on the topic of emulation, I don't know if we were on that topic, but we are now. I just veered the conversation over there. Rather than having to install Raspbian, PiOS, or an Android operating system, we're trying to get a pre-built image from a very reputable website, I'm sure. Since this mini PC is preloaded with Windows 10 operating system, you can run RetroArch, you can install virtually any launcher that you want. So on the software side of the house, you have a lot of versatility, a lot of options for emulation, and then the hardware side of the house, you have enough processing power to make that possible to run a lot of the harder systems, like I mentioned during the intro. As for a warranty, Beelink does have 1 year of limited coverage on their PCs, so that is pretty indicative of other pre-built gaming PCs out there like HP Omen, Dell Alienware, and Asus ROG. So as for the cons, areas of improvement, or shortcomings of this mini PC, first of all, there are only 2 USB ports. I'd like to see 4 USB-A ports and then 2 USB-C ports as opposed to the 2 and 1 that we currently have. So a new I/O with additional ports and plugs would be great on the next version. Next up, the Wi-Fi performance was a little bit underwhelming. Considering this has a pretty respectable Wi-Fi card, the numbers I was seeing in my testing just wasn't great. I will be doing a separate follow-up video, kind of a long-term ownership video down the road, in which I will test the gigabit or Ethernet speed, as well as start dabbling with overclocking this mini PC as well. Conservatively, of course, we don't want to fry the little thing. Next up, the packaging was a little bit underwhelming, considering whether you get the entry-level model or you get the flagship premium model, they all come in the same packaging, the same box, at least for the SEI models. And it just wasn't a very premium unboxing experience for, well, a computer, a new PC, a new mini computer for you. This is a big deal, a big purchase for you. Onto the pros, the design, the build quality, the appearance, the cosmetics, not only visually, but also when you get hands on it, you pick it up off your desk, it is incredibly sturdy. Even at its loudest when you're running benchmarks or gaming, it's not loud at all. And the form factor is so freakishly small. Yeah, you can build a small form factor PC, or you can buy a handheld gaming PC like a Steam Deck or a Neo or a Win GPD 3. GPD Win 3? I always get that mixed up. Did the Win come before the GPD, or did the GPD crack the Win 3? It's funny because I've actually reviewed that handheld PC and I always get the name mixed up. I probably said it wrong in the review, for God's sake. But this is even smaller. They tout about 1/40th the size of a typical desktop on their landing page, and yeah, that's about right. It's really small, she said, unfortunately. But it's also dangerous and packs a wallop. The computer, that is. So what is the verdict? Where does this mini PC fit into the grand spectrum of things, and who do I think it is good for? Well, this definitely has more performance, more processing power than something like a Raspberry Pi, which a full kit to build one of those is about $220 currently. And that has nowhere near the power of this mini PC. You're not going to be running Half-Life Black Mesa, and certainly not Dying Light. But if you build a dedicated small form factor PC, you can put a standalone graphics card in that motherboard and have substantially more power, but it's going to be a lot more expensive and larger and louder and create more heat and suck more electricity and all that other good stuff. Yeah, this definitely makes sense. It's a good middle point between building a single board computer like a Raspberry Pi, which is a fun little project if you want to tinker with your son and daughter and teach them about coding, or get into some amateur robotics, or build a ham radio, or, you know, there's a lot of things you can do with a Raspberry Pi single board computer other than just retro emulation, other than just gaming. But this mini PC, you can do a whole hell of a lot more because it's, well, a computer. You could video edit with it. You can game with it. Just don't get too rambunctious here. You're not playing Halo Infinite with this thing or anything. It would probably launch it. And keep in mind, my monitor's native resolution is 1440p, but if you bumped it down to 1080 or 720p, a lot more games would become playable, just a little bit uglier. This is a very impressive miniature PC. It is linked in the description below, and I'll see you Stallions and Stallionettes tomorrow. Peace. If you enjoyed the video, liking it helps it to get seen by more gamers. This information will reach and assist them as well, which in turn helps me grow this little channel, which I do greatly appreciate. Subscribe for more content like this. I cover news in the gaming community and industry, tutorials helping you get set up streaming and YouTubing, as well as honest gaming product reviews, keyboards, mice, headsets, controllers, mics, chairs, etc. There are some hefty exclusive discount codes found only in the description of my videos and only for the audience here at Gamer Heaven. I have links to all my other platforms and socials in the description below. To get in touch with myself and the Stallions and Stallionettes of Gamer Heaven, join the community Discord, and check me out at twitch.tv where I go live every other leap year on a blue moon if it falls into an odd calendar number, and my pH balance is on point. Just kidding, starting June I'm going to be live streaming a lot. Thanks for watching. This has been AK40 Kevin hosting Gamer Heaven, and I'll see you tomorrow because I upload daily, all the time, 60% of the time, sometimes, most of the time. Peace.